Hello, and welcome to ES Repair. I am your host, Mr. Fix-It. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to check your computer's power supply to see if it's failing and causing erratic operations of your computer. Some of the first signs that a power supply is failing is unexpected shutdowns, restarts, the computer not starting at all, period. Or, sometimes it comes on. If you let it sit for a while and you push a button and it comes on. And other times it won't. It's a good sign that the power supply is failing. If you're also getting errors when the computer's turned on, or if you're having erratic functions in the memory errors or program crashing from the hard drive, anything like that, these are signs that a power supply is possibly failing. So to rule that out, I'm going to show you what to do. First, you need to check to make sure that the connections, the power cord is connected firmly into the back of the computer. You also need to check the power switch. Some computers have power switches on the back of the power supply. Be sure that it wasn't inadvertently tripped off. There's also a voltage switch that can convert either depending on the input supply, whether it's 115 volts or 230. This allows the power supply to operate within those two ranges. Be sure, if you live in the United States, that the switch is set for 115 volts. Anywhere else, it would be set for 230 or 240 volts. Next, I'm going to show you what else to check for. Okay, now this is the back of this computer. Now this computer has been used in several videos that I've done, such as installing a hard drive, installing system memory, things like that. So y'all probably recognize this computer. This computer I built back in 2001, and it's been running ever since, and I've done all kinds of upgrades to it. Well, this time around, the power supply's failed. So what you need to do is they have the plug here. This is the switch I was referring to that switches between 115 or 230 volts. You want to make sure that it says 115. Now, not all power supplies have this. Some of them do have a power master switch that supplies power to the power supply. You want to make sure that's turned on. Not all power supplies have this. Next, you want to check to see what your power supply can run. This is a label. The label indicates exactly what type of power supply this is. For example, this is version 2.03, which is the latest version. And this is also a 350 watt power supply. Or a 300 watt power supply. Now, I've already tested this power supply, and this power supply is dead. But I'm going to show you later on as to how you can change the power supply. It's very simple. I took the liberty to go ahead and unhook all the cables off the computer. I already know it's bad. But what you want to do is you need to unhook the motherboard. This cable here. This one here you need to have it unhooked, and this is the cable that we're going to be testing. It's going to have 3 wires. It's going to have a green one, the green one here. We need either the black wires, and we're going to need a gray wire. The gray wire here indicates or tells the motherboard that the power supply is stable and ready for use. There should be anywhere between 3.3 volts and 6 volts through this wire. It should be within 4%. On average, it's about 5 volts. Now, if this wire was dead, then that's a good indicator that the power supply is dead and it needs replaced. Another way you could test for a power supply is taking the green wire here, as I'm showing here. This green wire can be touched to ground or one of the black wires off of the plug. This will automatically turn the power supply on. And if the power supply is dead, it won't come on at all. And when I install the new one, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now, once all the cables are unhooked, you may want to mark them. You also want to go buy the newer one that has this label on it. Now, this one here is a 300 watt power supply. The one I'm going to put in it is a 450, which is okay. This computer here is small enough that it's okay if you put a bigger power supply in it, just don't put a smaller one in it. This one here is a 300, I'm putting in a 450, so it's okay. Another thing you want to do is when you're purchasing a new power supply, you want to make sure that you're getting the same exact connectors as the old one. You want to make sure that your computer either has a 20 pin or a 24 pin connector. This is for the motherboard. You also want to make sure that you got all your peripheral connectors like this one here, which runs the IDEs. You want to make sure you have the exact same number or more. More is okay. You may have to get adapters like these here. This one here can run a floppy and 2 of the IDE drives. You want to make sure you have the exact same number of connectors to hook your hard drive, CD drives, DVD drives, even if your video graphic cards. The latest ones now are using PCI Express. Well, they also have their own connector. The motherboard also has its own connector on some of them, especially the ones that are running the new Pentium processors. So you want to make sure you got the exact same number and connectors on your new power supply before you install it. Now, to take these out, there's 4 screws that holds them in. As you see back here, there are 4 screws. Here's the fan. Just take the 4 screws out. Lay them somewhere where you won't lose them, because you're going to need them to put the new power supply back in. You want to make sure that it has the same patterns so it fits the holes when you install the new one. Now you'll need to reach inside, like I'm here, to make sure you got a hold of it. And that way when the last screw comes out, you got a hold of it. And you just easily slide it out just like that and remove the cables. Now this one here is my old one. This one here is my new one that I'm going to put in. Now, as you can see here, it says 450 watts max. Well, the old one I took out was older than this. This is okay. Now, you can also indicate here, it tells you what each power output can provide. You want to make sure that these match your old power supply all the way across the board. Everything needs to be matched or higher than what the old power supply was. This power supply also has a fan right here. You also have your power supply cord. It even has another one of those voltage, input voltage, whether it's a 115 or 230. You want to make sure that stays on 115, and it also has a power switch. You also want to make sure that these holes where the screws go in and all the power supply units, like right here, you want to make sure that they're in the same places so you can install it. Now all you got to do is install the power supply unit. You take your new power supply, to insert it. So you make sure all your holes line up. Put all your screws back in. You just need to hold it in place till you get your screws back in. Put the last screw in. You don't want them too tight because you don't want to strip the holes out. You want them just nice and snugged. And now the power supply unit is installed. Next thing we do, I'll get my old one out of the way here. I'm going to take that thing apart later. See what's wrong with it. Maybe I can fix it. Now, once you have your power supply unit installed, now you can hook all your components back up. You can separate all your cables. You also want to make sure that your cables are long enough to go from the power supply to your devices. You want to make sure that you got wires long enough. Now this one here has a SATA cable. Well, I don't have one, but it also has an adapter to where I can extend, make a Y adapter out of it, which is fine. You may have to make some modifications, which is okay. As long as you get the same number of connectors that you need, you'll be okay. Now, I'm going to hook up the motherboard connector. There's only one way that these will go in. You have a tab here, and there's a tab on the side of the other. You want to make sure that they line up. There's only one way that these will go on. You want to gently insert it. Don't force it. Make sure that they're lined up. You'll feel it click in there. Just like that. Now that one is set to go. Now we need to hook up our devices. This one here I don't have to worry about because my computer don't use a Pentium. These are the P4 connectors. I'll probably explain those in another video. Get that one out of the way. Hook up my CD and DVD drives. want to make sure that you put them in there correctly. They are polarized. They have these indentations. You want to make sure they're lined up properly. And let's get this one out of the way. I don't need it. Now, this video card uses a power supply. Some of the high-end PCI Express cards also has power connectors for them. This one here just runs off of the main IDE connector. Now, I haven't plugged all the plugs, but this one there's a SATA. Well, I don't need that one, but I also have a Y connector. This will work just fine. Now, I can hook them up. Again, you want to check your indentations, make sure you're getting them in there properly. Just like that. And now your new computer is set for a new test. Now, plug the power cord in. Make sure everything is connected. Everything's out of the way. You don't want to block your CPU fan. Very important. Plug the cord in. You may hear, there's your power switch. You may hear a popping noise when you first plug these in, which is normal because it's just a charge into the power supply. The power supply is getting voltage and power supply and current. Make sure it's nice and snug in there. Make sure that this, depending on where you're at, either says 115 or 230. Check your local electrical code to find out how much voltage that your house is using. And then all you have to do is flip the switch. Now there is power going to the computer now. All I have to do now is turn her on. And what do you know? She works. Well, that solved that problem for the computer here. The old one was dead, so I had to replace it. Now, you've watched WizKid demonstrate one tester that plugged the motherboard connector and all the others to test the power supply unit. Well, I'm going to show you another way that you can test to see if your power supply is failing. You want to first unhook the motherboard connector. Take out push down the lever, it'll slide right out. You'll need the green wire and the black wire, and you'll need this gray one. The gray one will tell the motherboard that the power supply is okay. It should be putting out anywhere between 3 volts and 6. So let's see what we got. Get my little trusty voltmeter. Any voltmeter will work as long as you can test up to 15 volts. Now I made special connectors using wire clips like these here to where I can better test the power supply plug right here. Now to test it, find the gray wire. That'd be my positive. Then you need to find a black wire. Now, as you can see, it says 5 volts, which is normal. That means that the power supply is working. If you don't get anything, then that means that the power supply is dead and it needs replaced. Another way that you could test to see if your power supply is working is taking a small paper clip, bending it around like so, and if you have a pair of jumper cables, you just need a small wire is all you need. I'm going to use these right here just like this. That way I can short it out. Short out the green wire and short it out with the black wire. Any black wire will do. The green one's in the 4th row. Then find a green one or a black one. And as you can see, it turns on. That's a good indicator that your power supply is working. If the test of the power supply passes, then it's something else on the motherboard. And that needs to be professionally looked at. But in this case, the old power supply was dead. I showed you how you take the old one out and replace it. I've also showed you how you can test the power supply to see if it's working and if it's the culprit as to why your computer is messing up. Well, I'm your host, Mr. Fix-It. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned something from this. If you come across with problems with your computer, hopefully you can identify whether or not it's the power supply or something on the motherboard. If it's power supply, now you know how you can change it out. Just be sure you get the same connectors and the same rating, or the same rating. The rating can be higher, as long as it's not below the recommended rating. Well, thank you for watching. Have yourself a good evening.